You're listening to Hashtag No Filter with Zack Peter. That's me, your naturally platinum blonde pop culture connoisseur. I'm the reality TV junkie, self-improvement addict, and host with only the hottest tea spilled fresh weekly. For more hot takes, go and give me a follow at Just Plain Zack. I always keep it funny and I always keep it cute. And if you're like me and you want to stay up to date with the latest reality tea, give us a follow at No Filter with Zack on the Instagram or join our private Facebook group. The link is in the description below. Happy New Year. We have survived 2020 and we are now into 2021. It's a new year. We're officially into a new decade. Let's hope that this year, let's just manifest all the good stuff to come to us this year. So this is going to be a special deep dive episode into all of the Tom Girardi, Erika Jayne Girardi, aka Erika Chahoy, which I found out is her real name, aka, in case you didn't know, FYI. So there's so much to be broken down in this episode, but before, and I have all of my notes right here. Look, I have literally just stacks on stacks on stacks on stacks of notes, and I'm going to try to break it down as cohesively as possible. But before I dive into all of this, because I don't want to get sued, I just have to say these are all allegations. All of the allegations discussed were made by former clients of Tom Girardi and Girardi Keese. Everyone, as in our country, in the United States of America, everyone is innocent until proven guilty. The findings presented here are all public knowledge and available online. Nothing in this episode is intended to incriminate, slander, or defame any person, company, or organization. I am not trying to ruin Tom's reputation. I'm not trying to ruin Erika's reputation. I'm not trying to ruin any reputations of any associates, lawyers, organizations, because there are a lot of different players that we're going to be breaking down in this episode. I'm not trying to incriminate anybody. I'm not trying to slander anybody. I'm not trying to defame anybody. Most of what's presented here is merely speculation or conclusions drawn from public record. My job as a podcaster is to deliver the news and deliver the tea that is available all online. My job is merely to present a very public case that is highly publicized and to kind of put it all together to feed all of the people that love watching Bravo and that loved watching Erika on The Real Housewives of Beverly Hills, which I'm really excited about the new season. I think it's going to be a really good season. I think it's going to be juicy. I'm really curious to hear what ends up making the final cut because I think there's a lot to break down in all of it. Okay, so let's start with, now that the disclaimer is out there and I'm not trying to get sued or ruin anybody's lives or reputations or anything. That is not my intention. I'm merely covering, as a news organization myself, I'm merely covering a very highly publicized case that is all over the internet. I mean, and this shit goes back decades, you guys. There are decades of information on all of this stuff. Okay, so why don't we start with the history of Tom and Erika? So Tom was known as this big shark lawyer. He was really notable for the Erin Brockovich case. That one was probably what put him on the map as an attorney here in California. He won that case, won a lot of money for a lot of clients, and then went on to have this career as this shark attorney that helped the underdog. That's kind of my impression of what Tom Girardi did, is he would take on these big cases. Usually they were contingency cases, which basically means the clients aren't paying anything up front. What happens is he takes it to court, he fronts the bill for all of it. And then if he wins, he happens to get a cut. That cut, from what I found, ranges from 25 to 40% is what he is entitled to, or what he, it depends on the case and depends on the actual clients, but it's usually between 25 to 40% is what he was racking in, or was supposed to be racking in, from these different cases. So he does look like a great guy. It's oh wow, this very wealthy, successful lawyer here in California. Look at that. He may not be the cutest, but you know what? He's got a lot going for him. He's got a big heart. He's helping all of these underdogs. He's helping widows and orphans, and helping senior citizens that have developed cancer, and he's helping burn victims. He is a great guy, right? Well, that's what Erika Chahoy thought when she met him in the late 90s. She was a waitress, okay? She was waiting on Mr. Girardi. She was about 28 when things she was in her late 20s. He was in his late 50s, early 60s. They met. She was a cocktail waitress at, I think it's Chasen's. Chasen's in Los Angeles. They became friends, as friendly as you can be when you're waiting on an older, richer man. CC Lala Kent. They were as close as you could be in that case when you're serving a rich old man. So he asked her out, which you'll remember from, she broke down the story on Real Housewives of Beverly Hills. He asked her out. He had a secretary called Erika Girardi and saying that Mr. Girardi wants to take you out. And she's like, if Mr. Girardi wants to take me out, he can call me himself. Click. We all remember that. Clip. She did clip to Mr. Tom Girardi. She basically wasn't, doing any BJs to get any Range Rovers. She was like, I've been in a marriage. I have a kid. I ain't got time for this, Tom Girardi. You want me? You gotta earn me. She was like Olivia Pope in Scandal with Fitz, okay? She was like, you want it? You gotta work for it. You gotta show me that you deserve this. And you're not gonna send me your secretary to come over here and try to get at me? Like, who do you think I am? Lala can? I'm really shading Lala, and I don't mean to. But actually have a love-hate relationship with Lala. Even though sometimes lately I feel like she needs to, be a little more humble, girl. Humble. So by 1999, Tom and Erika are married. By January, they're married. They're like, yes, we got this. I'm in it to win it. He had already been married. He was paying his little alimony to his ex-wife, and he was like ready for his like new young thing to just come. And it seemed like they really liked each other. He seemed to be very charming. She seemed to be really into him. He had a big bank account. And he had a really great reputation. Again, Aaron Brockovich, homeboy's out here just like slaying the dragons for all the little Davids in the California worlds. He was just slaying all of the Goliaths for them. So over the next 10 years, Erika, I guess, is really involved in their marriage. She seems to be somewhat involved in some of his business dealings. She's going to like dinners with him. This is all stuff that she has said on Real Housewives of Beverly Hills, that for the first 10 years of the marriage, they were really close, that she was really involved. After that is when things, their marriage started to have a little bit more separation. But she said that she was part of different organizations, and was very supportive of Tom and his career. And by the time we got to 2010 is when she kind of reached her like midlife crisis moment where she's like, okay, I need to do something new. I need to jazzy up my life. I'm kind of bored sitting at home, racking up credit card bills that Tom's just paying off. There's only, so many Louboutins I can go buy. And she didn't want to be like that housewife that's just stuck at home. So she was ready for something new. So she asked Mr. Girardi, hi, Mr. Mr. Girardi, can I have a music career? Can I do some really risque music videos and launch this music career? And he was like, yes, I love it. You are hot. Let's make these music videos. And if you watch some of these music videos, they are very risque, to the point where there was like one music video where she's like out of the club and she's like dancing on this man and she's like grinding on him. And this is her first music video, mind you. It's on YouTube. If you go to Erika Jayne Music and you look at her YouTube channel and go back 10 years ago to her first video, it's a lot. Okay. I'm just gonna say that it's a lot. And he loved to like brag and show her off, because there was a dinner that I guess a lot of the people in the legal world here in California, they have this annual dinner that they do. And so he decided in front of this whole room full of judges that he was just going to prematurely debut Erika Jayne's music video. And he did. And he was the talk of the town, and so was she. And people were like, whoa, they had a lot of questions. They thought a lot of things about Miss Erika Jayne. And she was like, it's expensive to be me. Get ready, guys, because it's going to get juicy. Because now that we're past 2010, we're now moving into 2015. So in 2015, these dates are going to be very important when we get into it later, because there's a lot of information that I'm going to be presenting here that's not in the head, or well, it hasn't been, it's all available online, but a lot of the headlines are focusing on one very specific case, and that's the Boeing case, which I'll recap for you in a bit. And we'll get into all of the different allegations and lawsuits that have come up. But right now we're just going through the timeline of Tom and Erika. So 2015, she joins Real Housewives of Beverly Hills. She becomes the breakout star. She's all over people. She's all over the place. And people are like, oh my God, who's this Erika Jayne? We love it. So she said that her music career was actually in the tank and it wasn't going very well. And she was getting ready to throw in the towel. It wasn't really making any money. It was kind of fun. She did it for about 5 years. And now it's like, where is it really going? According to her, when she joined the show, she was like, oh, I'm so successful. It's expensive to be me. How many F's do I give? Zero, none, not one. she came onto the show like, oh, I have all these top dance charts. When you really look at it, it wasn't doing that hot. Like, it may have found like a little underground cult following with the gays, but I don't think it was doing so hot. By 2018, she's at the top of her game. She releases her book, Pretty Mess. She goes on tour. We don't really see Tom at any of her book signings, but he's a busy man. She's a busy woman. They're doing their own thing. By March of 2020, which is now in the past. Welcome to 2021. So by 2020, she ends up booking the gig for Chicago, which we see Tom. He's like, do it. I support you. And she's like, oh my God, this is all I've ever wanted. And she's crying on camera. And we're just like, yes, Erika, we're rooting for you. Even though a lot of people don't really like Erika from what I've seen in the comments. So March 2020, Chicago, the show that she joins ends up getting shut down. The world goes into closures, okay? Then we get into late summer, early fall, and all of a sudden, these little lawsuits start coming up. Or not little lawsuits, it's a really big lawsuit that came up regarding the Boeing Incident, which is a plane crash that happened, I believe, back in 2018. Now, Erika finally files for divorce in November of 2020. In November of last year, Erika's like, I'm done. I've tried. We've tried to make this work. It's just not working anymore. I've decided that I'm ready to move on. She says that she wants, they don't have a prenup, which we discover. She says that she wants alimony, and he says that he doesn't want to pay her alimony. And except first, when she first filed for divorce, I was like, ooh, there's this other lawsuit. Is this possibly an attempt for them to conceal assets or hide money or do something? And then once he filed in return or in response, he ended up saying, I'm not paying her any money. I'm not paying her spousal support. And on top of that, I want her to pay for my attorney's fees. And everyone's like, whoa, wait a minute. Aren't you big Tom Girardi? Don't you got all this money? Aren't you big and bad? I almost did a Leon Locken moment, and I'm glad I stopped myself because I didn't want to get canceled for that in 5 years. So then he's like, no, I'm not paying you anything. And she's just like, oh, fine, whatever. It's expensive to me. I'll find money elsewhere. Thank you very much. I'll write another book. I'll do Housewives for another year or two. I'm good, homie. I got Scooter Braun, allegedly. And, you know, we're cute. Okay. Which also I found out that Scooter Braun and his wife, their marriage has ended. I don't know if this has become public knowledge yet, but it is a rumor that I have heard. It is speculation that they have split, which is very convenient considering the rumors with him and Erika Jayne. Just gonna say that. It's so juicy to be me. Okay, then we get to December, which was last month because now we're in January. So in December is when Erika Jayne posts on her Instagram all of these very old-looking text messages accusing Tom of having an affair with Tricia A. Bigalow. Who is Tricia A. Bigalow, you ask? Tricia A. Bigalow, she's a judge here in California, 2nd District, Division 8, California Court of Appeal. Very, very interesting, okay? California Court of Appeal. Let's remember that for later. Just going to say, sounds like a powerful woman in California. Let's just remember that little nugget of wisdom. She held her seat from 2008 after being appointed by then Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger, the Terminator. Her current term is set to end in 2031. She used to be Attorney General back in the 80s and 90s. Now she is a judge. I'm going to repeat. She is a judge for the 2nd District, Division 8 of the California Court of Appeal. I also want to repeat, I'm not making any accusations of people, merely just dropping some fun facts that we may want to take notes with because we may circle back to all of this. Because it looks like Tom was a very well-connected man. If he's over here banging this judge, allegedly, and he's paying for her plastic surgery. And, you know, we also know Governor Jerry Brown, Governor Gavin Newsom, very good friends of him, have spoken very highly of him. I think Gavin Newsom here in California even said that Erika Jayne was his favorite housewife. So just going to put it out there that Tom is a very powerful man here in California, has a lot of big connections, not making any strong suggestions, just, you know, merely presenting some things, not coming after anybody. Just want to clarify that. Okay, so that's Tricia A. Bigalow. Erika posts these like text messages. They look super old. People did some digging online. They could possibly be from the mid-2010s. They can be from earlier. Like, we don't know exactly when these text messages are from, but what we do know is that at some point Tom was cheating. Sources have come out saying that Erika was aware of Tom's cheating when they were trying to work on things, which kind of makes sense as we get into the 2010s. Once her music career was kind of taking off and she seemed a little busier, I think that they may have had some sort of don't ask, don't tell open arrangement. That is what I'm guessing. It seems like that would make sense. We also know that at the beginning of 2020, Tom was also photographed with another blonde woman that was not Erika. That was a little headline that came out, but didn't make much of a splash. But it came out that he was seen with somebody else on New Year's Eve, ringing in the new year, and it wasn't Erika. And everyone was like, "What? Why? What? Huh? Who? Who this girl? Who's she?" Okay. So now that we've gotten through the timeline of events, Erika and Tom are still going through this divorce. Probably won't be done. Legal analysts have suspected that this won't be done anytime soon because of all of the other legal allegations that have been made by former clients and partners of Mr. Tom Girardi. Okay? Now, the biggest one that everyone's talking about is this Boeing incident, which I'll recap for you very quickly, but it's literally everything everybody's talking about right now. So basically, in October of 2018, there was a plane crash. Some children lost their parents. Some spouses lost their significant others. And so there was a settlement that was reached that Tom argued in court. He reached a settlement of $2 million for these victims of victim, or how do I say this? They were the people that were left behind by the people that passed in the plane crash. Now, Tom, so basically it looks like they were owed about $500,000 each per client because it was $2 million that was owed to them, which the case, the courts determined that was the money that was owed to them. And they're like, this is not a lot of money for a man like this who apparently has a lot of money, who has a very successful law firm like this. I don't understand how this happened. Apparently, it's like a lawyer 101 thing that like once the settlement money comes in, it's not supposed to go into the personal accounts or the business accounts, but it's supposed to go into a separate account that pays out the individual clients directly. Somehow, somewhere the ball was dropped, and none of these families got any of the money, and somehow the money just kind of poof disappeared. We don't know what happened to it. They're claiming Tom did something with it, which is why now all of his assets have been frozen, for his personal and his company assets have been frozen until we figure out what happened to all of the money. Erika Jayne has also now been dragged into this because she was married to Tom. So basically they're saying that anything that is hers, which is why when she was selling her clothes, she was doing like some promotion. I think it was on Twitter. She was doing a promotion where she was selling her clothes, and they told her to stop selling her clothes because everything that she owns is technically now considered community property because she's still married to Tom Girardi. And so everything has been frozen until they figure out what actually happened to the money that was due to these Boeing clients, to Tom's clients that were part of this Boeing lawsuit. We don't know where it's at. That's kind of where everything is up at the moment. So now where did this all begin? Because now all these people are coming out left and right, and they're saying, hold up, Tom Girardi owes me money. Hold up, I'm a former client of Tom Girardi, and he never gave me all of my settlement. Like, we're talking about like literal burn victims and senior citizens that were diagnosed with cancer, people that Tom represented and has fought for. And now apparently they're saying that they didn't receive their settlements, or they didn't receive what they were supposed to be or expected to be receiving. Or some of them are even claiming that Tom not only didn't give them their settlements or the full money that they're entitled to, but he also made decisions or negotiated certain things on their behalf without disclosing this information to them, which is a big no-no when you're the lawyer. Like, when you're the lawyer, you're basically just the broker between the client and the defendant. And so you have to get approval from your client before you sign off on any deals. And so some of these clients are saying, we didn't sign off on that. We didn't know what the situation was. We didn't know what was going on. So the first big case that really stood out to me was this case with the senior citizens. So there was 138 senior citizens, and this was a lawsuit that hit back in 2014. Again, all of these dates, they're all going to kind of connect at some point, so get ready. Get your notepads ready. So in 2014, we had this senior citizen lawsuit. It was all of these women who claimed that they had developed cancer after taking a hormone supplement therapy. Tom went in, won a settlement, or his law firm, this isn't all just on Tom, but his law firm and associates, went in, won this case, and apparently the settlement was $17 million, is what they're claiming they ended up claiming what ended up being paid out as a result of this lawsuit. So they then went on to try and sue Tom, claiming that he misappropriated the funds and there was more than $10 million that was unaccounted for, and they don't know what happened to that. So now here's the other thing. Remember how earlier I mentioned that Tom typically took about, from what I was able to gather online, it looks like he was regularly taking about 25 to 40% in as the percentage that he's owed. And again, these were all contingency cases, so it's not like any of these clients were paying all of this money up front. He was fighting these cases and taking on a lot of the heavy workload to start. So he was saying that if I win this case, this is the percentage that I'll take. So let's say that Tom was keeping the high end of this settlement, which if the settlement was $17 million, then $10 million, which have apparently disappeared. We don't know what happened to that $10 million. That's a 58% of the winning. So that's not in the 25 to 40% range that he was normally taking out. That's 58% of 17 million. So they're kind of like, what happened? Where did this money go? We want to see your books. We want to see like how this all breaks down. He said that everything was kosher and that he wasn't going to give up the books, or not Tom, but like his law firm, like the entity of Tom Girardi, said, nope, we're not turning over our books. They kind of dodged it. Eventually, they ended up reaching a settlement, and they got the money that they were asking for because they were threatening to sue him. Now, it's also very interesting because around the same time, Tom went to 2 different lenders and borrowed a total of $17 million with very high interest rates, mind you. Which is kind of interesting because you would think, well, he should have some of the money, right? Like some of the money has to be somewhere. Like how could the money just disappear? And if the money just disappeared, then why are you then going and taking out 2 loans equaling $17 million, which coincidentally also happened to be the settlement money that was entitled to the seniors. Now, I don't think they were entitled the entire $17 million because, again, he was getting his own cut and any other associates were probably also getting their own cut, but everyone's claiming that they didn't get what they were supposed to be getting. So that's where it's a little fishy. But so he paid them off. They reached a settlement. That was done. I don't know what the details of that settlement were, but it was case closed. So he continued over the next several years. He was continuing to take out loans from different lenders, very high interest rates. And the interesting piece is that he was taking it out. So when you take out a loan, normally you have to prove that the money is coming back in or you place up certain property for collateral. So it was later discovered that he was taking out a lot of different loans and he was putting up a lot of the same collateral and lying to different lenders, which has now come out in their own documents because now they're coming out after this Boeing incident that blew up early or a couple months ago. Now all these lenders are coming out to sue him and all these other former clients are coming out to sue him because they're claiming that like he owes them a ton of money. And so from what I gathered, this looks like it's been 10 years of like a whack-a-mole sort of situation where it was basically a Ponzi scheme where he was getting in new money to pay back old money to settle with his clients that were threatening to sue him. And so it seems like he was waiting for them to come after him and threaten to sue. And then once they reached that point where they're like, okay, now I'm actually going to sue you if you don't give me my money, then he was winning other cases or taking out additional money to pay them off to keep them quiet. But then he had this other deficit then he had to pay off. And so he just kind of kept going and the snowball kept growing and growing and growing. And now we're in this case that we're in right now where this Boeing incident has come up and all these other people are like, you owe us money. And he's like, I don't have money. All I have is $15K and that's all I got in my bank account. And that's where Erika Jayne's like, whoa, I thought we were rich AF, homie. Like, what's going on here? Where's all our money at? That's where everyone's like, what happened to the money? Which is why all of his assets are currently frozen. And so according to the lenders, so a lot of people are coming out and saying a lot of different things about Tom Girardi. So according to some of the lenders, they're saying that he was very, very secretive about the fact that he even had other loans that had been taken out with other collateral that had already been put up. So for example, this is all hypothetical. This isn't actual real, but this is hypothetical to give you an idea of what the situation looks like. He's going to one lender over here and saying, hey, give me, let's say 10 million. Can I borrow 10 million? I'll put up my house as collateral so that if I don't pay this money back, you're entitled to that worth of my house. Then he's going to another lender and another lender and another lender and selling them the same story and telling them the same thing and putting up his house up for collateral again. This is all hypothetical. I'm not saying that this is what he actually did, but just to give you an idea, he was basically telling them all the same story, but not telling them about each other. It's like when you have a bunch of hookers and you're sleeping with all the women and you're just like, oh, I love you and I love you and I love you, but I'm not telling any of you about any of you. Basically what he was doing to the lenders, and now they're like, holy shit, we're not going to get anything from him. He doesn't have the cash to pay us back, and the collateral, the property that he put up, all these other collateral items that he put up aren't actually going to be entitled to us because other people are going to try to fight them first. And at this point, it's probably going to go, and the precedent's probably going to start with timing and like when the first lender is probably going to be entitled to that more than the other lenders that came later on. And these again were loans that he took out with very high interest rates. So this man has allegedly accumulated a lot of debt, which is not a good look, especially because I mean, who knows what's going to end up happening with Erika Jayne and how much she's going to have to pay back and like what she's going to end up owing because she's still technically his wife. And here's a little technicality that she may get out of this with. When she filed for divorce, she didn't put a separation date, which apparently is not standard. Apparently, when you file for divorce, you also list a separation date, which she did not do. So that's where they're saying her legal counsel is probably going to use that to like clear her of some of these issues. But I mean, it looks like they didn't have a good relationship or a close relationship for a long time. And I said, she mentioned that on Housewives, that they really didn't. There was a dinner that I was watching the other day or lunch where it was the two of them. And she's like, yeah, I don't see Tom often. We don't see each other very often, but that's what makes our marriage work is that we don't see each other that often. And so when we do see each other, we're able to really appreciate our relationship so much more. So now these are all of the lawsuits that have been building over the past 10 years that have really come to a head now, because there was even another client, a burn victim client, that was trying to sue him for money that he didn't pay. I think he owed him, this is just off the top of my memory, so please don't quote me on this part, but I believe he owed them 10, maybe 12 million. And so that was another client that was threatening to sue him. And so he, I believe, settled in January of 2020 and made an initial payment of $1 million to that client. And then those payments kind of stopped. So I think that's where this year, because everything kind of got clogged, it was like a backed up toilet. And since everybody's finances got held up, all of the courts kind of started to get clogged and all of the cases started to get put on hold. People weren't having much of a cash inflow. And as we can see with this little Ponzi scheme that was apparently set up, or what it appears to be, it looks like once the cash stopped coming in, he wasn't able to pay all of these people back. And that's when everybody started going crazy. And once the first big lawsuit came out, everybody's like, hold up, wait a minute, loop me in on this too. So now let's get into the ethics complaints, because this is where it also gets a little juicy. So in addition, this is where it gets a little crazy. And this is where I think a lot of the clients have some grounds to even potentially put together, or actually this isn't my idea, but I was listening to a podcast I was listening to Hot Takes and Deep Dives with Jess, who's been on this show before. She had a lawyer on, oh my God, where's the name of that lawyer? Because I want to, or she was a former LA prosecutor, Emily D. Baker. So on that, she was basically saying that, which is a great episode that I think you probably would want to listen to after this. Emily was basically saying that this could potentially turn into a civil suit because which I was able to dig up online, there was a series and a history of complaints that have been filed against Tom where there have been people that have been trying to get him disbarred for a really long time. So the fact that these complaints were coming up and he was getting slapped with fines and he was really being accused of ethical misconduct with his clients, the accusations made against him, that shows that that the state probably wasn't doing their job, or that he was connected to some very powerful people, like appeals court, Tricia A. Bigalow. I'm not saying that she did anything, but he had some very powerful connections, and he was paying them a lot of money, and he was paying for some of their plastic surgery. And so, these are just some things we want to just think about. So let's get into some of these ethics complaints, because this is where shit gets real shady. So there was a case, there was the banana, which I'm calling the banana pesticide case, okay? Because it's the easiest way I know how to explain it. So I'm going to try my best to explain what went on during this case and how it connects to other cases that we're going to see coming up in a minute. Because this is, again, where it gets really shady beyond just, I mean, it's really gross and insidious that like he was taking money from these clients and not actually paying them out. And these are, again, the underdogs, like victims of some really horrific crimes that were being, it's not a cute look. But so let's get into the first real big ethics complaint that I was able to come across, and that's the banana pesticide case against Dole and Shell. So now in Nicaragua, there is a banana plant, and the workers on the plant had decided that they were going to sue the American companies that were selling the bananas because I guess they owned the plant. There was a pesticide that was being sprayed on the bananas. That pesticide, they were worried about the damage that it could be doing to their body, potentially cancerous. I don't like pesticides. I don't like GMOs. That's just me. I don't fuck with that shit. Very elegant and classy for a journalist to say. Okay, so when the plaintiffs tried to sue these American companies for this pesticide, which was DBCP, that's the name of the pesticide. So when the lawsuits were filed, the defendants were incorrectly listed. So they were listed as Dole Food Corporation, even though the company's actual name was Dole Food Company. And then the other one was listed as Shell Oil Company, and it should have been listed as Shell Chemical Company because Shell Oil Company technically doesn't exist and Dole Food Corporation also technically doesn't exist. But Dole Food Company and Shell Chemical Company do exist. Okay, why is that important? Because once there was a settlement reached, Tom Girardi and his law firm and associates were the ones that were representing this case for the plaintiffs, for the farmers on the plantation against Dole and Shell. Why is this important? Because when the judgment was actually passed, the people that were technically supposed to pay out the money were Dole Food Corporation and Shell Oil Company, except neither of those exist because the correct names are actually Dole Food Company and Shell Chemical Company. So Dole Food Company and Shell Chemical Company were like, well, we don't have to pay you because that's not our company. That's not our actual company name. So we're not entitled to make that. Those companies that you listed are the ones that are entitled to make those payments. So Tom and his partner ended up going off, and I think his name was Lack. Yes. So Tom and his partner Lack were the ones that went to file for an appeal here in the States to make sure that those settlements were paid out by these companies. And apparently there is some proof that they were communicating with the team out in Nicaragua to try and get this resolved and to try to make sure that the names were updated in the court documents and that it really was shown that this was a clerical error and we needed to get these things updated so that these plaintiffs can receive their settlements. And there is proof of that. However, when they were going to the Court of Appeals and they were trying to actually make this happen and trying to get this pushed forward, it seems like there was some deception because they were saying that this was already settled. And I guess there was a document that was it was a false document that was submitted as proof that this situation had been cleared up with the courts in Nicaragua to actually get those company names corrected. Long story short, there was an ethics complaint filed against Tom Girardi and his associates for basically filing a false document that wasn't accurate. It wasn't true. And so he was slapped. He was hit with a slap on the wrist, and he and his associates were required to then pay back the attorney's fees of those plaintiffs. So the plaintiffs didn't actually get any money. Nothing. They didn't get what they were hoping to get out of it. I don't know what happened to the case afterwards after Tom was slapped with his ethical with the ethical complaints against him for falsifying that document and submitting a false document, which again, that's not a good thing. When you're a lawyer, you have to do everything by the book. So if you're submitting false documents, allegedly, I'm just going to say that just in case I misspeak on anything. When you're submitting false documents and saying that this issue has already been resolved and it hasn't, and the document that you're submitting isn't a real document, like that's really bad. That's not a cute look for Mr. Tom Girardi. Okay. Now, why is this important? Let's move on to the next case. So this next case After the banana pesticide case, there was another case, the Fogel v. Farmers case. Though this was Farmers Group Inc. Fogel v. Farmers Group Inc. This case, also Tom Girardi and his associates were representing Fogel in this case and not Farmers, because it looks like, because like I said, Tom's history was, I'll take on the underdog, go against the big giants, and try to win the cases for them. So this was a case of... it was an insurance fraud case, and they were suing for some fees and some fraudulent activity, allegedly. And so Tom was representing Fogel, and there was an attorney, Skadden Arps, who was representing Farmers Group Inc. Now, why is Skadden Arps important in any of this? Why are we even talking about Fogel v. Farmers Group Inc.? Because Skadden Arps, at the same time that he was fighting Tom Girardi in court for this farmers insurance case, he was actually representing Tom Girardi and in his ethics violation case with the banana pesticide situation that was going on. So here's Tom trying to defend himself for saying I wasn't unethical, and so he brings in Skadden Arps to come and defend him. Doesn't seem like that big of a deal, right? Seems innocuous. He brought in another lawyer to come and help defend him in this case because he needed representation. But why is it that during this exact same time, the attorney that you picked to represent you in an ethics violation is the same attorney that you're fighting in court? And not only does that sound sketchy enough that you are going to the attorney of the opposing side that you're fighting with in court to come and represent you on something completely separate, especially when it comes to ethics, an ethics violation, which you could get disbarred from, which he didn't get disbarred from. He didn't get suspended for. He just had to pay out, he had to pay some fines and pay out the attorney's fees. But Skadden Arps went to some big lengths, What his motive was, I don't know. I can't speak for him. Everyone's innocent until proven guilty. But Skadden Arps was trying to get his name redacted from public records so that people wouldn't know that Skadden Arps was the one that was representing Tom Girardi in that case, which seems a little sketchy. Why don't you want people to know that you're representing Tom Girardi? That's a little sketchy. Could it be the fact that you guys are literally fighting each other on opposing sides in another really big case? Why would you even want to work with the attorney that you're fighting against when your clients should definitely take precedent and take priority, in my opinion? Now, not only that, but Tom was slapped with another ethics violation because not only was this whole situation sketchy with Skadden Arps, who was representing him and tried to get his name redacted, but it was on the responsibility of Skadden Arps and Tom Girardi to notify their clients that they were working together outside of this case, and not even just working together, but working together to fight Tom's ethics violation or ethics complaint. Super sketchy. So Tom's now working with the opposing side. Like that's not a cute look. I'm not saying that means anything, but that's not a cute look. So let's move into the next case, which is also within the same sort of timeline of everything that's going on. Okay, so this next case is about ghost hunters. The reality show Ghost Hunters, where you see these people that go and they're trying to bust the ghosts. Okay, so there is Larry Montz and Dana Smoller. Larry Montz and Dana Smoller were suing Pilgrim Films. They were represented by Girardi Keese, which is Tom Girardi's law firm. They were represented because, again, they were basically the David. Pilgrim Films was Goliath. So it's this big case against NBCU, essentially, because they're the big parent company in all of this. So Larry and Dana are claiming that Ghost Hunters, that Sci-Fi's show Ghost Hunters was inspired by ideas that were theirs. It was, they came up with these ideas. Sci-Fi then went on to produce this show, which was technically theirs. And so I believe it was a bit of like a copyright issue of like that was their IP, that was their intellectual property, it was their ideas that were then taken to create Ghost Hunters and all of these spinoffs and the success that it was. So Larry and Dana were like, we're entitled to that, or like, this is shady that you stole our idea, basically. And so this was like several years in court trying to make this happen. It seemed like a very shoo-in, easy case to win. Okay, so Tom Girardi and Keese are the ones that are representing this case against NBCU and Pilgrim Films. Okay, now In 2014, the case was thrown out and lost on a technicality. Okay. And so they're claiming that, so Dana, I ended up finding her, she had a series of different Pinterest posts that I found online that were connected. She was basically implying that there was somebody on her legal team, or she was speculating that somebody on her legal team may have intentionally threw this case, which is like, well, that's kind of interesting. Why would somebody intentionally throw this case when it seemed like a shoo-in case and it looked like you were actually going to win this case? But it was kind of interesting how at the last minute you ended up losing the case when it seemed like a shoo-in case that you were going to win. And I think based off of the articles that were covering the case, it looked like Larry and Dana were actually going to win this case against Pilgrim. And so it looked like what ended up happening is there was some sort of statute of limitations clerical issue. It was a technicality that they lost on, and it was an issue with the filing date. And so Dana's claiming that Tom either missed something or potentially even could have thrown this case intentionally, which you would think, why would Tom actually do that? You don't think, doesn't he care about his clients? But then we see there, is this history of some other sketchy business with other clients allegedly, and he's clearly having some financial issues. So trying to connect all the pieces, trying to see how all the pieces fit together. But it was very strange that Larry and Dana, to me, from what I was able to find in the coverage online, it was interesting that they lost the case. And so basically, like I said, Dana's alluding to, or speculating that someone may have thrown it. Maybe it was, could have been her own attorney. Who knows? That attorney was Tom Girardi. Interesting. Conveniently enough, this case was wrapped in April of 2014. Conveniently enough, it was 2015. When the season of Real Housewives of Beverly Hills, season 6, happens to come out on Bravo TV. Interestingly enough, Bravo TV is also owned by NBCU, who Tom Girardi was just fighting in court. So you would think that it would be interesting if Tom was literally just in court fighting NBCU, and now all of a sudden he's okay with his wife just joining the NBCU family here at Bravo. Look, this is all like a lot of speculation. Is it possible that, there's really no connection between Erika joining Housewives and Tom's case? That's absolutely possible. I'm not accusing anybody of anything. I'm just saying, it could even be as simple as like he just was trying to make sure that he kept really good contacts over there so that, he didn't burn any bridges. That's also very possible as well. I mean, he definitely went after some big giants. It seems like he was a very smart man and was very, wanted to maintain a lot of important relationships for himself. I honestly don't know. I mean, it's very possible that this is all just like, grasping for straws, and Erika very likely, was maybe recommended by somebody and, just was able to make it on the show all on her own. That's all very possible. I'm not accusing her or NBC of doing any shady dealings. There's no history of that. There's no proof of that. I'm just saying Tom's been a little shady, so I wouldn't be surprised if, he wasn't trying to burn any bridges, or he was definitely, trying to do something, because the timing of it just seems a little fishy from where I'm sitting. The timing of it, you'd wrap up this case and then all of a sudden, you decide to put your wife out there. You also have all these like financial issues. So like, maybe he was really pushing her to join the show because they needed the money. Again, all of this is really kind of big and up in the air. And from the looks of it, Dana seems to think that Tom just could have potentially thrown the case, which also, I mean, it also looks like the case even kind of got them blacklisted, or just, potentially could have ruined some of their relationships in the process. They don't seem to have any entertainment credits after that timing. It looks like a lot of their credits are from like the 90s. They seem to have gone on, Dana and Larry. It looks like Larry has unfortunately passed away, but Dana seems to be, living, promoting. She has a healthy living website that she has now. It seems like she's definitely either intentionally, or maybe she just felt like it wasn't even worth it to go in entertainment anymore. Maybe she was so disheartened. I don't know. I'm just saying the timing was a little suspect. You end a case with NBC and then all of a sudden you join the NBC family. But again, that could very likely be absolutely nothing. But at the same time, I don't know. I don't know if I'm trusting Mr. Girardi. But again, everyone's innocent until proven guilty. Have to keep pushing that down. Yeah, it's really unfortunate. Rest in peace, Larry. My heart goes out to Dana and just any of the other victims that have unfortunately gotten tied or roped into all of this. It's really unfortunate and it's really sad. And my heart is heavy for all of them because it seems like a lot of people were screwed out of a lot of big dealings. And that is just a really shitty thing. And when you're tied to, I get one, fine, maybe even two, but like you have multiple clients that seem to have been screwed over to you by you, multiple clients that are claiming that you owe them money, ethics violations that, you've could have been disbarred for a lot of these issues. Like at some point we have to be like, what the hell actually happened here? And, at the same time, if he knew that there was a lot of shady dealings, maybe he didn't want Erika to join Bravo. From her side of the story, from what we've seen on the show, it seems like he really had no objection to that. And it could have really just been the fact that he needed the paycheck. They needed money coming in and he couldn't carry the weight anymore and maybe needed her to pay for her own glam. Maybe he needed her to cover Mikey's bills all on her own. It's a lot of unknown questions. A lot of questions is really what it's come down to. A lot of questions and still not a lot of definitive answers. Hopefully, to Dana, to the Nicaraguan workers, to all of these former clients that were represented by Tom Girardi that do feel like they, were in some way either taken advantage of or, feel like Tom did something to them or, just didn't treat them fairly. My heart goes out to all of them. Like, this is a really unfortunate, like when you look at like seniors with cancer, burn victims, like it's just, it really weighs on your heart when you actually investigate and look at all of these cases and you see how many people that are claiming they've been duped by Tom Girardi. And look, it's one thing to get a lot of publicity and then to have everybody come out of the woodwork. It's like when you get famous and you gain a lot of money and then everybody, all your cousins from like, cousins that you've never even met before that claim that, they went to school with you in Idaho or wherever. And they're all of a sudden just like, oh, you owe me money. You owe me, X number of dollars that I loaned you back in, 1708. And you're just like, who the hell are you? Where the fuck did you come from? I don't even know your mother. So it could be a situation of that where everyone's just now all of a sudden starting to come out. Or, I mean, it could be not to compare it, too much, but like Harvey Weinstein, where like once Rose McGowan came out with her big, her case with Ronan Farrow, once that came out, everybody else kind of felt comfortable to come forward because it seems like this man was very connected. The fact that there were so many ethical violations, or even, let's not even say so many, but just the two that I mentioned here, the complaints filed against him, which you could get disbarred for. You could lose your legal license, your license to practice law. You could lose that for some of these offenses. And the fact that he was able to get away with those with just little slaps on the wrist or having to pay some fees, and he was able to still practice law, like this is not a good situation. And so, I think the point that that was made on Hot Takes and Deep Dives about how this could become a civil class like lawsuit against the state of California for not doing their job and protecting all of these clients here in California from a man that has a history of some shady dealings. Again, everybody's innocent until proven guilty, but like this is not looking good for Tom Girardi and therefore not looking good for Erika Jayne. Now, let's see. There also is, so after the Boeing case that came out, one of the other lawsuits that came up was from Tom's former partners, her claiming that he was keeping money from them and that he was concealing assets and they didn't even realize that he was taking out loans against the building that they all collectively owned together that housed the law firm. Lots of people are coming forward and being like, I didn't know so many of these things were going on. I didn't know he was in debt. I didn't know he was taking out so many loans. Apparently, some former employees were even saying that he was or former partners and colleagues were saying that he was so secretive with all of the financials. And he was the one that was really the only person overseeing all of the financials. And I guess people just trusted him. He was a very well-respected man. When you're out there and you're doing the David and Goliath cases and you're helping all of these underdogs, like, who's really going to question you? I mean, I've heard things about Tom Girardi for many years that he is a shark in the courtroom, that he really goes hard when he's fighting for his clients. But now we're seeing that it doesn't look like he was actually fighting for his clients as much as he was actually fighting for himself. Not a cute look, Tom Girardi. Not a cute look. All right, I guess that other, like the next really big piece of all of this that everyone's really wondering, or a lot of people are really speculating, is how much of all of this did Erika Jayne, Erika Girardi, Erika Chahoy, how much did she actually know about what was going on? And so I have my own theory. I'll give you my theory first before we dive into all the other pieces of it. But like, so what I think happened is I think she was playing the good wife. I think she loved Tom. I think she adored Tom. I think he was a sweet talker. I think he knew what to do and what to say to get people. He had charisma. He knew how to get people to fall in love with him. And obviously Erika was in love with him. And I think when you're, young and you're a single mother, I think it's very easy to get caught up in the idea of somebody supporting you and being there for you financially and emotionally in a way that like you don't have to hustle as hard to take care of your son, and you have this man that you can love and trust that is going to be there for you. And I don't think that's a terrible thing for her to have fallen in love with him, not really knowing who he was. And I also don't think he started off as a bad man. I think relating back to the senior citizens case, it looks like that's really where the snowball started to build, and it just kind of took on a life of its own. And I think it was probably a lot of power and ego, and he probably thought that his dick was the biggest in the room, and he swung it around like every chance he got. And it was more of just, the power got to his head, and he thought that he was invincible, and he thought that he could get away with these things, and he thought that he could conceal it all, and he didn't want any of it to get out because of his big ego. It's not to say that Erika's entirely innocent. I think, yes, she probably did play the good wife, but at the good wife in terms of like, I'm going to turn the other cheek. I'm not going to pay attention to what's going on. I don't believe, and I'll just say this and I'll confidently stand by it, I don't believe she was fully aware of everything that was going on. Because if you think about it, Tom's a lawyer, and he's a very smart lawyer. And from what his former colleagues, from what his former employees, from what his former business partners, from what the lenders are all claiming, like everybody is claiming that he was deceiving all of them and that he was concealing things from all of them, concealing assets, not being honest about loans, not being honest about debt, not being honest about what's actually owed to certain clients. His clients are even saying that he wasn't even fully disclosing the settlements that they were going to be getting, and he was making decisions on their behalf without keeping them aware. So this is a story that everybody else is telling. So I think if everybody is starting to say something very similar about Tom and how secretive he was, I don't think Erika Jayne's going to be the one person that he confides in. I don't think he's coming home at dinner and they're having steak and he's like, you know what, honey? Just took some money from some orphans today. Those shoes that you're wearing, paid for by the widows. Thank you very much. I don't think he was doing that. I don't think he was disclosing all of his dealings to her. And at the same time, I don't think she was asking. I think it was one of those things where your husband's a little shady, your husband's a shark, he could be a bit of a jerk. And so, you're like, you know what? I have a good lifestyle. Things are really good where we're at. This Pasadena house is cute. I'm happy on Housewives. He's going and doing whatever he may or may not be doing with Tricia A. Bigalow. And, if I just kind of keep him in line a little bit and just make sure he's a little more discreet with what he does, I'm going to live my life. I'll let him live his life. And I'm just going to, sit back and enjoy the life that I have. And that's this, the wealth that he's accumulated. I think she showed up for dinners when he needed her to show up. I think she, rubbed elbows with associates when needed. Anytime he needed her, I'm sure she was there and happy to be there to support him. But I don't think she was really much involved, at least in these later years. We see all of this really kind of coming to a head after 2010, which is when her music career started. That's when we really start to see the cookie crumble a little bit. And that's where I think their relationship started to, they started to fall apart and they started to separate a lot more. And they've been very honest. And for years, she was open about the fact that they don't see each other that often on Real Housewives of Beverly Hills. So I think she did, however, on Housewives admit that for the first 10 years, she was very much by Tom's side. And she was very much involved as much as she could. She would, schmooze with his associates. She joked that, they all hated her ass and still hate her ass. And she kind of laughed about that in her confessionals on Real Housewives of Beverly Hills. So I think, again, she knew her husband was a jerk. I think she knew he was a shark in the courtroom and he had a lot of power. And I think it was one of those things where it's like, if I don't know, then, I think Bethany was right. You can't play smart and stupid at the same time. And I think she was smart. And I think she was smart enough to not ask questions. She was smart enough to not get involved. She was smart enough to keep her hands ends clean. It's interesting that in her first season, she accused Lisa Vanderpump of being the sniper from the side who didn't want to leave any fingerprints. And it seems like she very much knew those tactics, and she knew how to keep herself busy and preoccupied and out of town. So however the money was coming in, she wasn't going to ask questions. Now, the interesting part of it all, there was an accumulated sum of $20 million that was, some people say, funneled. What his lawyers are claiming is that there were loans paid out to a company that she owned that was helping with all of her glam and her music career, and that is called EJ Global. So these are the 4 different companies that are coming out. So there's a really good, Ronald Richards on Twitter is closely kind of following the case and tweeting live updates about it. So I recommend following him. And so he's the one that actually tweeted out that there are these 4 different companies that are basically at play in the whole scandal here. And that's EJ Global LLC, where Erika is listed as a manager and a member. There's Girardi Financial LLC, where she's listed as an officer and the secretary. There's New Nation Pretty Mess Records LLC, where she's a member but apparently suspended. And then there's Candy Rain LLC, where she's a member and also suspended. Now, this is where it gets tricky, and this is where we get into what is Erika's actual liability and what could she actually be facing. I'm not a legal professional. I'm not an expert in any of the legal matters, but from what I found online, from the other podcasts that I've listened to, this is what I've been able to gather. It looks like Tom's firm was paying out these quote unquote loans to Erika's company, but I don't think Tom ever expected to be collecting on these loans moving forward. I think it's a little shady. It's a little shady that he was even listing them as loans to her company instead of just being like a gift or a payment or write it off as some sort of expense. I'm confused as to why it would be listed as a loan. And I think the only reason they would mention or say that it's a loan is to make sure that if there was any sort of backfire or backlash, it could potentially throw the heat on Erika and her company, which is a little shitty. But I mean, and that's a bit of a stretch for me to make. But I mean, why else would you list these payments as loans? And so now with all of these accusations against Tom and all of these people saying that he owes them all of this money, it looks like he clearly doesn't have the money. And his assets have all been put up for collateral on the loans that he's taken out. So legal analysts that I've, followed about all of this are saying that it looks like it's probably going to become a bankruptcy case, and it's going to go to bankruptcy court where all of the assets are going to need to start to be divided. And one of the assets that they're probably going to come after, whether or not, as of right now, everything that Tom owns is technically considered community property amongst himself and Erika. So it looks like everything that she owns is still technically his. So they can take her assets and her, jewelry or whatever she has, and they can use that to pay off the people that are owed debts. But the other big part where she may be legally responsible is possibly paying this $20 million, which I don't believe she actually has. I don't think her book deals or her housewife's paycheck have her with $20 million in the bank. I think that $20 million got spent. I think it was spent on private jets. I think it was spent on jewelry. It was spent on producing music videos. It was spent on this big music career and this glamorous lifestyle that she was leading out there. And, she was patting the puss for everybody to look at. And now it's like, okay, well, now somebody has to pay for that puss. That puss is expensive. That is a $20 million puss. And if we're going to be patting it, you're going to be patenting it in bankruptcy court. And I don't know how much the judge is going to want to see you patent that puss as much as he's going to see you writing them checks, girl. So could she go to prison? Maybe. If they're able to find out that she was complicit in a lot of this stuff. I mean, it looks like a lot of the shady dealings were done within his company and his law firm, which she doesn't seem to have any sort of connection to. The only company that it looks like she might have some sort of legal responsibility to is Girardi Financial LLC, where she's listed as the secretary, or that's where it's super sketchy. I mean, there's also EJ Global LLC, where the 20 million went, I think she's it looks like that's an entertainment company and she can write off all of those expenses. But if Tom Girardi's estate wants to come after EJ Global to pay up that $20 million in quote unquote loans, she's likely going to have to either find a way to pull out that $20 million, work out some sort of settlement deal, or file for bankruptcy herself for that company, which is just, it's not looking good for her. For me, what I would see the best case, I mean, her reputation is already tanked. It looks like most people, there's already like a petition to get her fired. It looks like they together have some sort of history of tax liens that have been placed for taxes that they weren't paying, like dating back to the early 2000s up until recently when they filed joint when they filed their taxes joint together. It looks like those also kind of had some unpaid taxes with liens that were placed on their properties. Like it's looking like a really messy situation. And depending on what they can prove she actually knew. And this is where it's going to come down to, paperwork with her signature on it. If she was the secretary in this Girardi Financial LLC, and that's somehow connected to all of these other lawsuits or this bigger scandal, if there's a connection there, then as the secretary at the board meetings, you should have been taking meeting minutes. And as the secretary, you should have been signing off on that sort of stuff, which shows that you were complicit in what was actually going on. Whether she was or she wasn't, that's the question that's going to need to be determined by her lawyers and his lawyers, and they're just going to need to figure all of this out. But like text messages, emails, all of those things that show in writing that she was actually participating in all of this stuff is what's going to be the biggest piece that's going to incriminate her from what I've been able to gather. But it doesn't look like any of that's going to exist. I don't think there are emails. I don't think she has a company email from the Girardi law firm, from Girardi and Keese. I don't think she has a company email from Girardi Financial. I don't think she was even really signing off on anything, to be honest, probably other than joint tax filings. I think she's probably going to be able to get away with saying she didn't know much. And I actually believe that to an extent. I'll repeat. I think she knew her husband was shady, but it was one of those things where it's like, I'm going to keep my head in the sand. That's your business. Those are your dealings. I'm going to let you handle that. I'm just going to sit back and eat the caviar and drink the champagne and ride on the private jets because you're treating me real good right now. And you've treated me good for many years in terms of, keeping the roof over my head, providing for my fancy lifestyle that I have, paying for my music career, giving me this music career, essentially buying it. But yeah, it's not looking great for her. And I think at this point, her reputation is tanked. Probably her best bet is to talk about it on Housewives. And it's like, well, what is she actually going to be able to say? What can she say? It doesn't look like there are any gag reels. Tom hasn't blocked her from being able to say anything about any of it. The Boeing case does look like it was like there was a judgment that was, that was decided, and that was that the families are owed the money. All the other lawsuits that are coming out have yet to actually be there's yet to actually be any settlements or updated settlements or conclusions to any of those. So we'll see how all of that plays out. Tom is now saying that, or his lawyers are arguing that he's unwell, he's mentally not there, which I don't know if that's a good argument to have or a really shitty argument to have. That is TBD. But what I do predict we will see on Beverly Hills this season is that she claims that there was a history of cheating. She tried to make it work. They lived separate lives. And I think there's a lot of evidence to corroborate that. I think the text messages with Tricia Bigalow probably wasn't great that she posted that publicly. But again, there could have been a bigger strategy possibly at play. I think she's going to play, I was the good wife. I stood by him every time he needed me to stand by him. I trusted him. I loved him. I think she's going to play up that whole card. We're going to see crocodile tears. We're going to see her hopefully have some sort of remorse, because if you follow her on Instagram right now, it's not looking cute for her. She needs to check herself and have some humility, because it looks like she's just living her life, and it's not looking good in terms of for the public looking out, in terms of her reputation. She's probably going to need to stay on Housewives for a few more years, because she's going to need a paycheck, because she's not getting a dime from Tom. And if anything, she's probably going to be caught up in the mess where she's going to have to pay out a lot of money, and at least possibly up to this $20 million, or else she's going to have the company file for bankruptcy. But it's a messy, messy situation, and there's so much more to unfold, and I'll continue to unfold it. A lot of people are trying to wonder how we can compare this to the Giudice case from Real Housewives of New Jersey. It looks like this case is way worse, because there are many different lawsuits. With the Giudices, I think it was bank fraud and loaner fraud. fraud where, you know, Teresa signed off on some paperwork, and the two of them, like, they were fraudulent in filing their taxes and taking out loans. And that just, you know, that was a messy situation. But this is just so much deeper because, again, the victims that have been taken advantage of, it's really deep, it's really dark, it's very insidious. You see all of the ethical complaints that were filed against Tom Girardi for many years that went unchecked. Like, somebody, like, at some point you would have expected someone to come in and intervene and prevent this man from being able to cause further damage. The fact that he was able to do this for well over a decade, probably even 2 decades, if we can really track everything. Because, like, this Dole, the banana pesticide case, like, all of those were in the 2000s. That, like, this is not looking good for Tom. Like, he's done. He's already been disbarred from what I believe. Like, there's no way he can practice law moving forward. And he is just, whether we're going to see him go to prison, whether he's going to have a mental breakdown, whether he might pass before then because he's already 81 years old, so he's getting up there, if his health really is in bad condition, like, this is going to be a mess that's going to need to be followed for many, many more years. And I think there's no way she's leaving Real Housewives of Beverly Hills anytime soon. If anything, she may be the new Teresa Giudice of Real Housewives of Beverly Hills, because, you know, Bravo is going to try their damnedest to keep following this. And at this point, I think she's stuck between a rock and a hard place. She doesn't have any other jobs lined up. Her music career isn't going anywhere. It never really was, unless she writes another book. But I don't think she can write another book until all of this is settled and until the divorce comes through. And it doesn't look like the divorce is going to be happening anytime soon with all this other shit that Tom's going to have to deal with. So it's bad. It's not like he's leaving her with a shit ton of money if he dies. It's like, when you marry a man like this, you're like, okay, he might die soon. I might rack in all these millions. And instead it's like, nope, I'm going to be racking in all of this debt. And I'm still not even divorced from him. It's bad. It's real bad. Some great resources that I think would be really good for you guys to check out beyond this. I'll continue to cover this in the future. I don't know how often I'm going to be doing updates, because I want to kind of make sure when I give big updates, they're very meaty. But I would suggest there's a really good episode on Hot Takes and Deep Dives. It's a podcast. I've had Jess, the host of the podcast, on this show. I've been on her show. She had on former LA prosecutor Emily D. Baker, who really weighs in and gives a legal analysis that I thought was really good. Ronald Richards on Twitter, again, closely following the case, tweeting live updates, also a really good resource. Up and Adam on YouTube, great person to watch that gives good tea and good, you know, updates on what's going on. But I mean, it's really just, it's big. It's like, how did Tom Girardi, the biggest questions I think coming out of this are, how did Tom Girardi get away with it for so long? What did Erika know specifically? I don't think it was much, but I mean, the fact that there's the potential that he used his influence to throw the Ghostbusters case to potentially have some sort of connection that got her on Real Housewives of Beverly Hills, that's freaking huge. Like, and does that mean that further incriminates her in some way if she was continuing to benefit with not just the lifestyle, but with opportunities that were now coming as a result of some of his alleged shady dealings? It's a lot. But send me your questions. Send me any articles that you find. Let's continue to investigate this together. My heart goes out to all of the victims out there that are trying to sue him, all of his former law partners. I'm sure some of them are not as clean as they're claiming to be. Let's just say that. But, I mean, if you were duped by Tom Girardi, I feel really bad for you. I even kind of have a little sympathy for Tom Girardi because, like, homie, your house of cards is tumbling down. My heart goes out to everybody involved. This is a messy situation. But again, check out Hot Takes and Deep Dives. Check out Emily D. Baker. Apparently she might be doing a podcast about it. Check out Ronald Richards, Up and Adam. All great other people to follow. I think Kate Casey even did something on her show. I didn't listen to that episode, but I know other podcasters are bringing on other lawyers, and we're all just trying to make sense of all of this together. So keep it coming. Follow me at Just Plain Zack. Follow the show at No Filter with Zack. Join our private Facebook group. I'll probably drop some tea up in there. So get ready. It's some good stuff, everybody. Get ready. Lots of great new episodes of hashtag No Filter with Zack Peter coming in 2021. Let's go at it. Let's hit it. Let's hit it strong. I will talk to you guys later. Bye.